following program is brought to you by friends and partners of End Time Headlines.
All right, what's going on, guys? It is Monday night, and this means we are live. We typically do our Monday night live stream prayer and devotional, but tonight we've got a very special treat for you. In light of some things that's been going on, I knew that I was going to have this discussion, and I wanted to have a discussion, and this would be a great night to have this discussion and talk about this. So if you didn't catch last night's program, I want to encourage you to go back and watch that. Last night we talked about, and we did a podcast, and this was kind of a foundational program to get you kind of equipped on some of the insights that we're going to be discussing tonight. And it was called Angels, Giants, and Demons, The Great Deception is Coming. So I want to encourage you, when you get a chance, if you didn't catch that, go back in our archives here on YouTube, or again, if you have the free app, you can go in there and you can catch that as well, and be sure to catch up with this. So tonight, I wanted to bring on a good friend of mine, and we're going to have a great discussion on this. And we're going to be talking about the mystery of all of these scientists, all of these individuals that are all somehow in some way involved in space programs. It started out, it was like 5, and then it went to 7, and then it went to, in fact, Josh Peck and I came on his program and we did a podcast on this, and it was 9 at that time. And then it just keeps growing. Now we're up to 11. We're up to 11 scientists that are either missing or they're dead. And that's what we're talking about. So tonight, we're going to be discussing a little bit about this in a lot of detail about this. We're going to be doing some reaction videos. Pete Garcia is with us. He's going to give us some insight. But before we get to all that, guys, do us a favor, hit that like button. Help us push this out. If you're listening by Apple or by Spotify, we appreciate you as well. And you can give us a like, give us a good review there. That'll help us push it out on Spotify and Apple and all these programs. And again, if you don't have our app, guys, I want to encourage you to pick that up. Because if you have the app, if you download it, you'll be alerted of these programs like this, these podcasts, the breaking news, all of the updates, prophecy updates, everything's going to be, and for you guys who have already had our app, you'll notice when you look at it, it's got a whole new facelift. It looks a lot better, a lot more responsive and quicker. It keeps all of the articles inside of the app. So you can scan that barcode right there and get yours Apple or Google Play. Again, depending on if you have an Android phone or an Apple phone, we got you covered. So without further ado, I want to bring on our good friend here. We're talking about Pete Garcia. Pete, how you doing, brother?
Hey, man. How are you? I'm good. It's busy.
Yes, it is. It's it's busy. That time of year, man. Yeah. Very, 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 very busy, but nice weather for the most part, at least where I'm at here in the state of Georgia. But we have been absolutely pummeled by pollen, and the allergies are brutal where I'm at. So
I hear that it's really bad, and it's not been too bad here in Texas, knock on wood. So I'm not complaining.
Yeah. So, man, it's great to have you on and back again. And I understand that you're going to be with us in Boise, Idaho for the upcoming conference at the end of May. And guys, if you haven't registered for that, you can go to hopeforourtimes.com and you'll see, if you go under events, I believe it's under events, and you scroll down and you go to the May 29th conference. What is it? It's May 29th and May 30th. It's a Friday and a Saturday. And there's going to be several guest speakers there. It's going to be myself. Pete Garcia is going to be there. Brandon Holthouse, Pastor Tom Hughes, Billy Crone. Who am I missing? Am I missing somebody?
You got Tom Hughes. Did you
Yep.
say Tom Hughes?
Yep.
Brandon, Billy, you, me. I think that's it.
Yep. So if you're anywhere in driving vicinity of Boise, please go and go register. You can go and register right now. Again, that's Hope for Our Times, and go to the event section and scroll down, and you'll see it there. And if you can come out and make it, I'd love to meet many of you guys in person. Look, I'm excited, man, because I get to meet all of you guys in person. Never got to, you guys all, you've been able to hang out and done this for years, and this is my first rodeo on this, and I get to hang out with you guys. And listen to this, guys. This is going to trip you out. This is the first time, believe it or not, some of y'all is going to blow this. Is going to blow you out of the water. I've never been out west. And some people were like shocked by that, but I've never been out west. I'm a Southern boy that's never been out west. I know it's sad and it's pitiful, but we're going to break that record. And not only am I breaking that record this year, but we're turning right around and we're going from Boise. And then in June, we're heading back out to California, but it's not for ministry purposes. It's for my oldest son just graduated. He graduated from high school in May. And for his graduation gift, we're going out to see the redwoods and going out there in that part of California. Yeah. So we're super excited about that. So anyway, guys, so we wanted to bring Pete Garcia on here because this thing has gotten weird, man. I think the last time we had you on, this was kind of like, if we use a snowball analogy, this thing was probably like a softball that was rolling downhill, and this thing has picked up momentum and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And at the time when it first came out, and it wasn't even national news. It was just like we put it up on our website, but I didn't see a lot of national news outlets or media outlets talking about it. But now it's all over the place. In fact, we got some videos on this. Before we do that, guys, I want to let you know that if you're not following Pete, you can find him. This is his YouTube channel, Rev310, at Pete Garcia 542. He's got a great YouTube channel there. You're going to see a lot of his videos there. Sometimes when he's at these conferences and stuff, you can catch some of those, if they're able to stream that, or he'll put up information on that. So be sure to, if you haven't done it, go and subscribe to his channel and you'll be blessed by his information. So let me give you guys a little bit of an introduction. Excuse me, guys. Again, that time of year. So as I said, I'm going to pull this up. Let's see if we can pull this article up, Pete, together, and we'll look at this. So here it is, UFO. Well, let me see if I can get a better picture of this. So space scientists found dead after warning my life is in danger becomes 11th mysterious case as Trump vows answers. And as you can see here, a space scientist in the U.S. has been found dead after she warned my life is in danger in the latest mysterious case. 11 people now working close to the U.S. space programs have now died or gone missing recently, with Donald Trump now vowing to uncover the truth. Now, I don't know, Pete, I don't know your thoughts on this, but I don't get too excited when Trump says, I'm going to uncover the truth, because again, if we look at the track record, this is what was said about the JFK files. This was said about the Epstein files, and allegedly this is what's being said about the alien disclosure. And now we have another one to add to this. And, oh, no, I got another one. I forgot about this one. He was going to get to the bottom of the mystery drone incursions. Remember that? And yeah, we were told, what did he say about that? Do you remember?
I think Caroline Leavitt actually came out. I remember she said something about it in one of her pressers, but it was just so matter of factly. Oh, that's our military or R&D or something like that. And then it was just, they dropped it and they just moved on to whatever else. So I don't remember exactly when that was, but it was a few months later. But she made it sound like it was no big deal.
So
I don't
this
know.
is why, people they email me, they message me, and they're like, well, Brother Ricky, what do you think about this and this? And look, and people get mad at me, and it's amazing. They ask me for my opinion, and I give it to them, and they get mad. And I'm just telling you guys, I'm not putting all my hopes in, some kind of disclosure on this or some revelation on this, just because of the track record we've gotten from this. So I do want to, I'm going to do this real quick. Pete, I'm going to go over just to show you guys the magnitude of what we're talking about here. There has been, again, we're talking about 11 individuals. Listen to what their occupations were. All right. So here's an individual that she was a director of materials processing at NASA JPL and an engineer for Aerojet Rocketdyne. Came up missing hiking in the LA National Forest. Then another doctor, he was a renowned Caltech NASA astrophysicist who discovered water on exoplanets. He was found shot dead on his front porch in February of 2026. Another individual who was a principal researcher at JPL who designed instruments to detect life on icy moons. He was found dead on July 4th, Independence Day of 2 years ago, and the cause of death was never made public. Interesting. And then you had a 24-year veteran physicist at JPL. This was Michael David Hicks. He passed away in July of 2023 at 59 years of age. Notably, no autopsy was conducted and no cause of death was disclosed. Then you have these nuclear and exotic science researchers. You had one individual who was a director of MIT's Plasma Science and Fusion Center. He was shot dead in his home in December of last year. Authorities attributed it to a, quote, jealous former classmate. His expertise in nuclear fusion has fueled outside speculation. Then you had a young researcher at the Institute for Exotic Science who worked on anti-gravity and plasma physics. She died of a gunshot wound in June of 2022. So these are not all recent, guys. It's a span over several years. But somebody out there finally put all the pieces together and like, wait a minute, this is a red flag. Then you had a staffer at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, and this was the birthplace of the atomic bomb, who mysteriously disappeared. All right. And then you had a high-level military and intelligence figures. One was a general. He was the former head of the Air Force Research Laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He disappeared on February the 27th of this year in Mexico. Still no word from where he's at. In fact, his phone and glasses were found in his home, but his revolver and his hiking boots were missing. Then Stephen Garcia, don't know if there's any relation there, but he turned up. Yeah, he turned up missing. I think you'd know this by now, but he turned up missing. He was a government contractor with high-level clearance at the Kansas City National Security Campus. He vanished in New Mexico in August of 2025. And then the latest two that are in review is a Novartis director. I don't even know what that is, who went missing in December of 2025. His body was found in a Massachusetts lake in March of this year. And then another woman who was an individual tied to sensitive research hubs who disappeared and is still under review. So,
Wow.
What's your thoughts so far on this, brother?
Well, my computer was getting ready to die. I thought I had it plugged in, and it was like the thing that it was plugged into is not working. So, well, you've really come down to about four different options. Either this is all, you got to think about how many people work in this industry as a total. And I would say probably within the United States, you've got somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2.5 million people that are involved in the contracting, consulting, research, all the R&D stuff. and the aerospace side, as well as NASA, somewhere around 2.5 million. So when you look at the numbers of just, let's just say 11 people mysteriously dying or disappearing, it doesn't seem that shocking right away.
Right.
And it reminds me of that. There was an episode on this show called The Blacklist, and I know The Blacklist is a fiction show, but I can't remember the episode. But it was the guy. The show was called The Freelancer, and he specialized in killing people in like these ways that were like accidental,
Mm.
and like you would have a train crash in Pittsburgh or some town, and nobody would ever have thought twice about the train crash. It just, things like that happen. But when you go down and look at who was on that train, there may have only been one person they really wanted to take out, and they covered that one death by the many, right?
Mm.
So I know that something like that exists in reality and in real life. That there is you've got various people, various organizations with agendas, and they have their own power struggles and structures. And so information is currency. We just got to keep that in mind. Ever since really the 1960s on, information is currency. That's right in the heart of the Cold War. And so you have all of these competing empires, and I would even include a lot of corporations into that who make more money per year than some small countries, in terms of their whole GDP. So you have 11 people that are effectively gone. And of those, I think one, two, three, four, five, five of them are deaths. Then you have
Yep.
another five that are disappearances. You have, I had actually 13, but the other three, one was a plane crash, one was another plane crash, and then another was supposedly old age. But the rest of them, that seems like it cannot be coincidence that many high level people with that connections to Los Alamos or Wright Patterson Air Force Base or NASA or JPL, that you would have that many people mysteriously go missing, or they would have deaths that are not of natural causes, or that are not easily or openly being able to explain, like a heart attack or
Right.
uh, cancer or some other kind of thing, car
Yep.
accident. So it seems like if you are the powers that be, right, and you don't want this information coming out, and even if you were to take it back to the 1950s, every so often you allow somebody to die or sacrificed on the altar of confidentiality, and you do it in such a way that it sends a message out to the other scientists and the other researchers and the other engineers not to get too lippy with the media,
Mm.
and it's just enough to keep everybody in line. And then you have what we've had here is kind of a rash of these things, and especially the more mysterious ones where the people, just like a Monica Reza, who was hiking with friends, and they're hiking out in the wilderness. They look back, she's there. A minute later, 30 seconds later, they look back and she's gone. They can't even find a trace of her.
Crazy.
And when the dogs came out, they brought the dogs out to search for her. The dog came to her hat that was missing there on the path, and it traced the scent back to the hat, and then it just disappeared altogether. The dog couldn't pick up the scent anymore. So
Wow.
it just seems like there's something afoot here. And I was going to
Mm.
say, with the rash of these deaths that we've seen here in the last just 2 to 3 years, I think this is the people that have the information are getting nervous because of how aggressively Trump has been pushing disclosure, and the congressional hearings back in 2017 and again in 2023. And if you go back and watch those, you'll hear those whistleblowers. The congressmen or senators will ask them, do you fear for your life, or has anybody threatened you? And most of them have said yes.
Right.
Schellenberger, Grutch, I can't say his name, Grush. I can't
Yeah,
think
I
of the
know.
other
Yeah.
guy. There's about three or four guys that have all said that,
Grudge.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're worried about our safety because you've got 17 different intelligence agencies in the United States alone, and you don't know who's trying to protect what. You have Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, uh, you know, uh, Boeing,
Now
any of
Palantir,
these,
yeah.
yeah, you have any of these major companies that may have some of that technology that they don't want to get out to the public, and they may want to keep that technology for themselves because they're using it to sell some type of a device back to the United States government. And I would, if I had to bet on any of these, whether it's aliens or fallen angels, or our government, or these corporations, or foreign governments, which is also a possibility, or it's just all coincidental, I would have to rule out coincidental right off the bat. I mean, you just wouldn't have this many people missing from a particular, especially such a specialized field that a lot of these guys get into. When it comes to space or aerospace and these exotic materials that supposedly that we have stored there at Wright-Patterson. And then you look at all the cross connections that they have between those 3 or 4 locations: Los Alamos, Wright-Patterson, NASA, and then JPL. It just seems to stretch credulity. And so I will say that I did hear today that Trump's, or the administration, they're looking at all of these deaths together. So when you look at them individually, you can write them off as like, well, maybe the guy was suicidal, or maybe the person was, mentally not stable, or they, high stress, or somebody had a grudge against them, or what, personal grudge. And you can kind of rule those out. But when you take them all in together, in the aggregate, there's no way that that's all just coincidental. It's just too many all at the same time. So it seems like a dangerous field to be in, for sure.
Now I got we've got some videos, guys, we're going to pull up, and Pete and I are going to do some reaction to this. So we'll play this, and anytime you want to hop in and say anything, you let me know, and I may pause it and interject something. Now this is Trump's reaction when they informed him about this, and they questioned him. Some of the press questioned him. Here's what he said. Let's watch this. And this is a clip from Fox and Friends, and they're going to get into a little bit more details of this.
Missing scientists with access to classified stuff, nuclear material, aerospace, they've all gone missing or turned up dead in the last couple months. Based on what you've been briefed, what do you think is happening here, and do you think that this is connected or totally random?
Well, I hope it's random, but we're going to know in the next week and a half. I just left a meeting on that subject, so pretty serious stuff, but we're going to be hopefully, I don't know, coincidence, whatever you want to call it, but some of them were very important people, and we're going to look at it over the next short time.
All right. Now, he said a week and a half, over the next week and a half. Now, this was published 3 days ago, so we're getting to a week. So that puts us out, what, next week? If I'm correct. Mm-hmm. So if this is true, then we may know by next week. So it'll be interesting. You got anything you want to say right there, or we'll keep on playing the video?
Yeah, I don't think it'll be next week, but if there is a conspiracy afoot, you've got to think it's same thing with the Epstein files, same thing with disclosure just writ large on UFO, UAP type activities. There's a lot of powerful people involved in these things that don't want information getting out for whatever their reasons are.
Right.
And so you'll see pushback behind the scenes in probably ways we won't ever be privy to, but you've got to think of an army of lawyers just, being deployed in various directions to stop any type of forward momentum. And a lot of this stuff we don't see. We don't see it, right?
Yeah.
You got to think about the Epstein files too. How many famous and powerful people are in those? Their lawyers have lawyers, right? I mean, they are going to throw everything at the system to stop their name from getting out.
Yeah, we'll never see that.
Yep. And even the names that have come out, what has happened? Nothing.
Nothing. Right.
Nothing yet. So hopefully justice is coming and they get their just due. But I'm just saying that those people are the kind of people that can afford to just throw lawyers at you until you're drowning in paperwork and red tape. So it'll have to take Trump really just driving this over the edge to get it through. And I honestly think if it were any, and I'm not cheerleading for him. I'm just saying he's the kind of guy that is going to do that
Right.
simply because he says he wants to do it. Then he's going to do whatever he wants to do because of his hubris, his pride, whatever. And so you've got the battle of the ages right now going on behind the scenes of disclosing this type of information that's been held secret for 75 plus years.
And that's a good point. That's a good point to interject something here. When I say, when I make the comment that I just don't hold my breath on this, I'm not saying it trying to, have a condescending tone towards the president, because you're right. He is the one who would pursue these things. But we have to understand that even his hands are tied at a certain level. So I don't have any doubt that there is things that he has the motivation to uncover, if you would. But when he gets down to it, when he gets down to the nuts and bolts of this and he gets behind, I guess you could say behind the curtain per se, then I believe he's running into opposition, adversity, that, we will never see the light of day. There's bigger hands at play pulling strings, the wizard behind the curtain, if you would. I'm trying to use every analogy I can think of here. And I think that's a lot to do with this. I think that's, and it's for national security reasons, safety. There's some things that if they came out and say, and we may touch a little bit about this, congressmen and senators have come forward and said that if the American people knew what we knew and what we've seen and what we've heard, then they wouldn't even sleep at night. They would be, they would be terrified. And the problem with this, though, it's almost, we've become numb to it. People are just like, yeah, we've been hearing this, whatever. So it's almost like the climax is building up. But let's go back to this video. Let's see what else they can pull out of this. And then we're going to, like we said, we've got a few videos to go.
So take a look. The White House now probing the disappearances of the people behind me, the deaths of 10 scientists at least. Let's break down some of the cases. For example, let's look at Michael David Hicks. He dies at the age of 59 years old. And David Michael Hicks, a longtime JPL scientist involved in asteroid and comet research, no public cause of death given. And then you have a situation like Monica Reza. Monica Reza vanished while hiking under weird circumstances. And then you have William Neal McCaslin. This guy disappeared in February, deep ties to the Air Force research programs. So everyone has a bit of a mystery to their passing, and people are wondering, with the very similar backgrounds, extremely bright people, extremely successful people, extremely valuable people, is this all related? As you heard, the president can't say yes or no publicly yet, but the mystery remains. Let's bring in House Oversight Committee member, Missouri Congressman Eric Burleson, who is calling for the FBI to get involved. Congressman, when did you first find out about this?
My office found out about it last year. We sent a letter to the FBI about a gentleman named Matthew Sullivan, who actually we had reached out to. He was scheduled to come in for an interview. Within 2 weeks, he had suspiciously committed suicide. That report was referred to the Office of Inspector General. They deemed it credible and urgent. They then referred it to the FBI. So this is not the first that we've heard of this. That was the first that we became aware of.
The president was briefed extensively yesterday, and he's worried about it. We hear about all this. We also know we're in a big-time race with China for all this, too. And then people wonder about the undisclosed UFO program that more and more people are pushing to get answers on. Is there a relation to any of that from which you could share with us?
There certainly is. So General McCaslin, for example, is someone that we had reached out to twice to try to get some answers from. He is someone who has a critical role in working for the Air Force, particularly when it came to research. He was the one that oversaw a lot of this advanced research. He was someone that was very difficult to get a hold of, but we reached out to him twice, and then he just mysteriously disappeared.
Wow.
You know what's wondering? If one person disappears, we see press conferences and we see people and mysterious deaths. We would see family members. Why haven't we heard more from family members and associates about their concern?
Yeah, I don't know, Brian. I wish we would, but look, what's really disturbing when you look back and you reflect on it, you've got Monica Reza, you've got Anthony Chavez, you got Melissa Cassius, and you have Stephen Garcia, all of which, along with General McCaslin, walked out of their homes, or in the case of Mrs. Reza, she disappeared on a hike without their phones. They just literally disappeared, left all of their devices at home. This is not normal. These are some of the most advanced scientists, researchers in our nation, some of the most important people for our nation's national security efforts, and they all just mysteriously disappeared.
Pete, I feel like we're watching an episode of Tom's show. You can't make this stuff up, or you can't make this up. I mean, this is like, I feel like we're watching a Netflix series. I mean, this would make a great script for a novel or a movie or a series. This is just, it's very disturbing, honestly. I mean, this is like Men in Black stuff. When we talk about ufology and disclosure and stuff, I've studied Roswell, the alleged Roswell crash in Roswell, New Mexico, and this was the same kind of weird stuff that was going on then. You had the crash, and they, at first, when it first came out, the first publication said that it was a, and you can go and look in the archives, and it said it was a flying disc. But then the government got involved, and then the quote unquote Men in Black got involved, and they changed the whole narrative, and it was a weather balloon. And I'm sure you've studied all this out. This has got a lot of that kind of feel to it. Don't you agree?
Yeah, and what's fascinating too is that you had the Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard. They did their Babylon working occult ritual in '46. Then you have 18 months later, you have Roswell that happened, and then right after Roswell, you had the Nation of Israel. Well, actually, you had in November the United Nations voted to partition what is now Israel, but they decided then to partition the land there between the Arabs and the Jews. And then 5 months later or 6 months later after that, Israel declares their statehood. So all of this explosion of UFO sightings and just the increased exposure to them across America and across the world happens right around the time that Israel becomes a nation again. And it's only ramped up. And we see this ramping up even more now. And going back to, just a couple of years ago with those mysterious drones and the orbs and all that stuff flying around in December and January, it seems like in the same vein that we have a rash of these scientists and researchers and engineers that go missing, as well as the mysterious deaths and this is all just within the last couple of years. It seems to me that the enemy is increasingly desperate to hide what they're doing, hide their plans, and it's being kind of thrust into the light. Even the disappearances now can't be hidden because there's so many. But those people, they, individually, they may have been, if you think about kind of a puzzle, right? Each one of those individuals may have had some type of unique information or experience in their background that would help tie all the pieces together. But now that they're gone or they're disappeared or whatever, they're dead or they've disappeared, now that picture will never be complete. So if you think about, I don't know, like JFK, for example. Yeah. And if you had 50 of the top people that were involved that day, were involved with the motorcade, were involved with the security, involved with that. And then out of that 50, you take out like 4 or 5, and they might have died from a mysterious accident or they've disappeared. But those 5 individuals out of the 50 may have had that key information that would have unlocked everything. So they had to go. Like there was no way to keep them. And I think that's probably in the same vein here, in the sense that there's too many for this to be a coincidence. The question is it seems like there's foul play, but who was behind the foul play? So here's something to consider too. In 1951, Eisenhower basically created what we have today as the modern classification system for information. So you had confidential, secret, and then top secret information. And these were executive orders that he did. And the executive order basically allowed the government and at the time it was just the FBI and the CIA to come out and be able to hide and classify information from the general public. But then by 1966, because of all of the rash of different sightings and all the different things that were happening, there was the Freedom of Information Act came out.
Yeah.
So if you're the government at the time, what do you do with that? You can't keep that stuff and sit on it. All that Roswell and whatever else they had, you hand that over to a private organization like Ford Motor Company, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, etc. They are not subject to FOIA. They don't have to answer to a congressional committee or to some kind of oversight committee. They can just hide that stuff away forever, and then they can work on reverse engineering it and doing whatever they want to do with it, which is why we have some technology today that, going back to the early 90s, we have these kind of like triangle-shaped ships that can fly at incredible rates of speed and things that are traditional, even our best, fighter jets and things cannot do. So they're doing something with the reverse engineering technology, and they've been hiding it in these private corporations. And again, back in the 1950s and 60s, those guys that were handed those technologies then, they're all dead. I mean, they've all long since passed on. And so the information with those companies has been held closely and only by a select few that even know they exist. And now most of the original people are gone. They're already dead. So all of that, how that came over, because I'm sure they don't leave much of a paper trail anyways, wherever they go. So that's just, why I don't really think it's the government, but it could be a foreign government using cartel coyotes and those type of guys that are familiar with, especially around like Albuquerque, New Mexico, and places there in the Southwest. They could easily smuggle in some Chinese agents or Russian agents to get in there and nab these guys while they're out on a hike. They probably didn't want to wear those they didn't want any technology on them when they go out hiking because those things can be traced, right? So that may be another reason why they took that stuff off.
That, and it makes you wonder if they knew. They had already known they were being tracked. They knew their lives were in danger, and that's why they were trying to avoid it. It is very mysterious. We got another. Here's another video. Now, this one was recent. This is the Sean Hannity show. Let's check this out.
Reported last night, 11 U.S. scientists, some tied to highly sensitive government work, are now dead or missing, raising very serious questions about national security. The White House has launched a probe into the mysterious disappearances, with President Trump now vowing to get answers within days, calling the situation pretty serious. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt wrote on X earlier today, the White House is actively working with all relevant agencies and the FBI to holistically review all of the cases together and identify any potential commonalities that may exist. No stone will be unturned in this effort, and the White House will provide updates when we have them. Anyway, here with more. The only person that can pick this apart, the host of Crime Stories on Fox 1,
this should be
our
interesting.
friend Nancy Grace. I also want to get an update on Nancy Guthrie from you tonight, but this to me, it is either the oddest coincidence or something's really going on.
I can't believe I heard Sean Hannity say coincidence. One, murder or missing person is an isolated incident. Two, a coincidence. Three is a pattern. A pattern. Three is a pattern. That's my rule of thumb. And Sean, I can't count. Literally cannot count the number of felonies, multiple offenses I have tried, be it serial murder, serial rape, serial child molestation, you name it. One, isolated. Two, coincidence. Three, it's a pattern. And I'll tell you what kicked it off. It was the disappearance of retired Air Force Major General McCaslin. Now, McCaslin had access to the most highly sensitive classified materials in the country. He disappears. His wife's gone 1 hour, Sean, 1 hour. She comes back. He's gone. Interesting. His hiking boots, His wallet.
Hold on, I gotta stop, Pete. Here's a question. I think this was brought up. Why are none of the family being interviewed? Think about this. If this, I mean, we hear about it all the time. Missing children, missing spouse, missing this. People go missing all the time. It's on all. There's like 300 crime investigation channels on DirecTV and everything else, and you see this all the time. Yet, and maybe I missed it, but I'm not seeing this. Are you seeing this?
No, I think General McCaslin's wife did a couple of posts trying to dismiss any kind of links between her husband and any kind of relevant new technology. But you got to think, I mean, it doesn't matter if he, retired 13 years ago, or whatever the case is. The information that's still in his head and things that he's seen is still valuable to other nation states or to other various, even if it's corporations fighting against corporations. If you've got Lockheed Martin, trying to sabotage Raytheon or whoever, and I'm just throwing those names out there. I don't know if there's truly any type of animosity between those two companies, but they're competing for limited resources. And so let's just say hypothetically that they did take them. To me, you've got to think from us viewing this, that has national security implications, and it's just pretty darn strange, right? But to her, it's her husband, right? Her husband's missing. Her, if it's their children, it's their dad.
Yeah.
It's maybe their uncle. So it's personal for each and every one of these families. So there's probably some degree of just trying to offer some type of respect, to kind of not badger the families. But we've seen that in the past. Joan Benet Ramsey, when they found her body, their family was under a media circus scrutiny for years. So I don't know. It could also be that because this is going to become an active investigation for all 11, they may be limited on what they can talk about or who they can talk to in terms of the press. So there may be that factor as well. But even the deaths like the Michael David Hicks, there was no cause of death, but then there was some type of a page put up in his name or some kind of a link to Alcoholics Anonymous or something. So implying that he died from some type of alcohol related, whether it was self-induced or he, in his inebriation, he did something. So it could be that that's also a convenient cover as well. Now, the fact that we wouldn't even know about any of these deaths really, or we probably wouldn't be looking at this in terms of national news if Trump had not come out on February 19th and said, hey, we're going to release everything. And I'm going to direct Secretary of War Hegseth and all the other, 17 different, intelligence agencies to start handing over whatever they have to release to the public. The government went and then bought the domains aliens.gov and then alien.gov, right? And they went from being just like completely dead websites to now there's some activity behind the scenes. And we know from Representative Luna, Anna Paulina Luna, that there's somewhere around 42 videos that the Pentagon's been holding on to and not wanting to release. So I think that alien.gov and aliens.gov probably will be the platform that those videos are streamed from to show that there is disclosure happening. And whatever these videos are, I don't know if it's going to move the needle across the American public, so significantly that it just really shakes our world or our worldviews. But it's definitely going to strengthen and embolden those who have said all along, see, I told you it was spaceships. I told you it was UFOs, because these are going to be the kinds of videos that you can't discredit. And, the Pentagon would not be holding on to these things if they were clearly fakes or they're weather balloons or whatever. So we've already seen some pretty bizarre stuff that's already been released. Yeah. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see, I guess.
And, I'm just going to use this kind of mindset that Nancy Grace is using here. Let's talk about coincidence. So you have all the mysterious drones that were appearing over major sensitive military sites and bases and airports. And then you've got these individuals and their occupations that turned up missing. Then you have, and all this is centered around the whistleblowers. And then you have the disclosure. This is the year of the disclosure. Then and don't forget this, we've had an unusual amount, unusual amount of space activity as far as like fireballs and meteors, to the point where that's made mainstream news. And so it does throw out a lot of these questions, like, you know, again, my mind and this is just how my mind is wired. You know, you can say I've watched too many movies, whatever you want to say, but look, I think predictive programming is a real thing. And I remember, you know, some of these programs like Deep Impact and Armageddon and some of these even newer shows that came out, new movies, when astronomers and federal agents and people in high positions, you know, knew of impending disasters, they knew things were coming, they went overdrive to try to suppress it, hide it, sweep it under the rug, silence people, the whole 9 yards. That's why I said earlier that this is like literally watching a sci-fi movie play out. I mean, this is literally like what we're watching here. But I'm going to go back and let's see what else Nancy's got to say on this.
And it's 38 are missing, but guess what's left behind, Sean? All wearable devices that could track him, his
can you back it up?
phone, and his...
Yeah. Hold on, let's go back.
What did she say, 38?
He's gone. Interesting. His
let's go back.
most highly sensitive classified materials in the country. He disappears. His wife's gone 1 hour, Sean, 1 hour. She comes back. He's gone. Interesting. His hiking boots, his wallet, and his 38 are missing. But guess what's left behind?
Oh, his 38, his gun.
Oh, it was 38. I thought you said 38.
All wearable devices that could track him, his phone, and his prescription glasses. They're all left behind. Interesting. Why would he leave like that? Now, again, isolated incident. But here's the nexus to Monica Jacinto Reza. He oversaw her funding, and that was from the AFRL, the Air Force Research Lab. She goes missing too. They are 2 of 11. Those are the most recent ones. Again, this is not a coincidence.
You know, I should have learned when you were on the podcast hanging out with me. I told the story. I made the mistake one time. I showed a little bit of negativity because I was frustrated related to the Nancy Guthrie case, which I'm going to ask you about in a second. And here it is. Sean, did you just say coincidence? I got to be careful when I interview Nancy Grace. You got to check her out on the podcast.
Here's another problem with that case, Sean.
Oh, boy. Now I'm going to get excoriated again on my own show. Go ahead.
They're lumped in with UFO conspiracy talk.
There it is.
Right there. That's wrong. This is not about an ET. These are about human beings that have been killed or are missing, and they are being branded as some sort of a fringe investigation. That is not the case. These are highly intelligent scientists.
Okay, let me be clear, because I wasn't in the beginning. I agree with you. This is not... This is real to me. I agree with you. I stand corrected. By the way, most people are not used to hearing me say that. All right, let me ask you about this. Maybe a breakthrough. I'm hoping for one.
Okay, he's going to talk about Nancy Guthrie. So we're going to move on. Now, Pete, you sent me this one. I haven't watched this at all. So let's. This is 17 minutes long, so we won't watch all of this.
Is Lauren Conlon. She's the East Coast contributor for LA Magazine. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Sure. Thank you for having me and covering this story.
Yeah. So let's talk. I mean, we've had a great amount of interest, a lot of inquiries around all of these missing scientists and some of these mysterious circumstances. Let's put this latest one up here on the screen. We have a missing nuclear official becomes the 10th person tied to this dark pattern surrounding U.S. secrets. So
all right, guys. So this is a little bit older.
Lauren, you've actually dug into the circumstances of these. Is this a real story, or is the Daily Mail or the tabloids, are they making it more out than it should be? Or should we all really be paying attention?
I mean, I think we should all be paying attention. I think this is very important that this is coming to light. So I think the people that say, oh, well, it's a coincidence because this happened in 2022. This happened in 2019. No one was paying attention then, but we're paying attention now. And what we're seeing is a pattern. And I don't want to sound cliche here because I think what's going on beyond some of the mysterious circumstances of these deaths or of these disappearances. We're seeing names like Michael David Hicks, who was...
All right, so some of this is becoming redundant because we've heard it. Pete, do you know, is there a particular part of this video that is really good to listen to, or did you screen this, or...
Yeah, if you go kind of just, if you want to fast forward it, kind of to the middle somewhere, she goes on, they let her just talk, and she goes into all kind of detail about everything. So
his death. I connect Carl Grillmaier's, or I'm sorry, let's go back. I will say Neil McCaslin's death. General Neil McCaslin, he was a retired Air Force general, and he retired a number of years ago, but he was stationed at one point at Wright-Patterson. That's in Ohio, and if you're not familiar, reportedly, they hold extraterrestrial debris from the 1947 Roswell crash there.
Whoa, now that's something.
Again,
yeah, that's
I've
true.
never
That's
seen
right.
it with my own eyes. But he also worked with Monica Reza there, and she was a rocket science. She co-patented the Mondaloy, or co-invented the Mondaloy. So she was very, very intelligent, as was General McCaslin. And Monica Reza disappeared while hiking in June of 2025 in California. And Neil McCaslin disappeared in February of 2025, just walking out of his house in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So these are months apart. Monica Reza gives me chills, number one. She seemed to have disappeared into thin air. She was behind a friend or two while hiking about 30 feet. It's kind of like they look back and they're like, hey, and then a second later, or I don't even know, a minute later, she's gone.
That's going to be the narrative when we get raptured out one day, right, brother?
yeah, that's true.
I just thought of it. So.
Vanishes into thin air. There's very little known about this search, but what I could find was that they had a canine dog. They were sniffing around. They found a hat. Her scent stopped at this hat. I mean, what? And she was actually marked deceased and had like some kind of biodegradable burial. And I know that anybody can go online and do this. I understand how that works, but that's very odd that someone would do that when there was no body and there was no statement from NASA, no nothing. We just kind of skimmed over this. And what I'll say is, and again, I don't have proof, but former FBI agent Chris Swecker, he has a lot of great information and a lot of great intel about what happens when these people are possibly kidnapped and tortured for intelligence. And he's not saying it's by our own government, right?
Right.
We don't know who it is. We're not saying that it's not.
Yeah.
Right. But there's all these options. And then Neil McCaslin, this is very similar to the 10th person missing, the 10th official, Stephen Garcia. Both of them were last seen in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I mentioned General McCaslin walked out of his home. At the time, his wife didn't know if any guns were missing from his gun safe, but officials from the sheriff's office later reported that he was missing a revolver. He didn't take his phone, didn't take his wallet, nothing that he would need, not his glasses. And Stephen Garcia, and I think I mentioned this was February of 2026. Stephen Garcia, he is another official tied to, he had top security clearance at KCNSC out of New Mexico. He was in charge of all of the classified equipment and assets, tens of thousands of dollars. And, this is through a source. I do not know his job description, verbatim here, but he also was last seen walking around New Mexico with a handgun. And so, with Stephen Garcia, it was stated by officials he could be a danger to himself. Neil McCaslin, there was a silver alert, and his wife, in this very, in my opinion, disturbing 911 call, kind of indicates that, quote, he may not want to be found. She said he deliberately changed his clothes before he left. She said he was experiencing this brain and mental fog, and this is one of the reasons that he retired. And she just said he was getting frustrated. But she never would have thought that it would have meant this. And she's been criticized about this 911 call. And I don't want to criticize her because She called immediately, when she realized he was gone, and everybody reacts differently. I don't think that she would have thought that it would have been anything like this. She just said he was kind of frustrated. The last thing I'll say, the last thing I heard from authorities was that they found an Air Force sweatshirt a couple of miles away, but they have not confirmed whether or not that belongs to General McCaslin. So I've got to make some calls. And then lastly, I know I am blabbing so hard right now.
Keep going.
One of the deaths that I am very, very invested in, and I think this is this kind of crosses over into some other things we're mentioning in society right now. But Carl Grillmeyer, he was a Caltech astrophysicist, reportedly a genius, who's doing amazing work in finding water on other planets. He lived in Llano, California, in a very isolated area. I mean, you can pull up the map and you can just see his house, very isolated. So in December of 2025, he sees a guy walking on his property who we now know is Freddie Snyder, carrying a rifle. And he's freaked out, obviously. So he calls 911. Freddie Snyder gets arrested. He says, "Oh, I was going to the post office. I just needed this to protect myself against wild animals." Well, the post office was the other way. And he gets arrested. And for whatever reason, they give him a felonies charge. And or I shouldn't say for whatever reason. Whatever reason is they let him go. They release him ROR after that felonies charge. And by February 6th, prosecutors dropped the charge entirely. The judge dropped the charge entirely. There's some kind of California penal code where essentially it says in lay terms, if you don't have any priors, something like this would make sense. We're going to drop this. We're not going to keep you coming back to court, et cetera. Well, that was February 5th. By February 16th, Freddie Snyder allegedly goes back and shoots Carl Grillmeyer in the torso on his porch at his home. And now Freddie Snyder is sitting at Twin Towers, I'm assuming, pretty close to Nick Reiner, and waiting arraignment. He gets arraigned April 29th. So what's crazy is that California is so ridiculous with their court dockets and their papers. I've had to write letters to get indictments. I've had to send FOIA requests here. But one thing I will say is Carl Grillmeyer's wife has spoken out. Was right before I went on News Nation last week. The producers, we were all kind of diving in. They were making calls. And his wife said it's not connected to any of these other scientists. That's her belief. Neil McCaslin's wife came out and said it's not connected. The Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office in New Mexico has said enough with the conspiracy theories. I get it. I totally get it. Neil McCaslin's wife also works in aerospace research, and Carl Grillmeyer's wife, she's a widow. She probably saw this crazy person.
All right, I got to stop and interject something. Didn't they tell us that in 2020? Enough with the conspiracy theories. You people are tinfoil hat nut jobs, et cetera, et cetera. But who had the last laugh on that? Just saying.
Yeah. Every time they tell us to not question the narrative, it inevitably, like a year or two later, the narrative comes out and it's exactly what we said it was all along. And, and then it gets swept under the rug and nobody talks about it again. And I did a presentation years ago on conspiracy, and there's always this pattern that happens, right? Some event happens, like Las Vegas in 2017. It's all over the news for like 2 weeks. And then some official narrative comes out, whether it's believable or not. It's whatever the law enforcement and the media and the government decide to put forth. And then after that narrative is put forth, you can't question it anymore. And then they stonewall and they shut everything down. And only those fringe people are still talking about it, months later or years later. And that's designed on purpose to make you look crazy. And then you find out a few years after that that's exactly what happened.
Yep.
And then the people that were championing this were saying, "Yeah, we were right all along." And by the way, those people, end up having all kinds of issues. And if you look back through the history of whistleblowers and all that kind of stuff, their endings don't typically work out all that well. So it's just. It's always the same pattern with conspiracies that it's all over the news. Some narrative comes out, and then that just whether it's right or wrong or true or false, and then that's the narrative that everybody is forced to swallow, and then a few years later the truth comes out, and it's just like it's designed to break our trust in the system. It's designed to break our trust and then faith in the government and the way of life we decided to put ourselves under here in the United States. And I think that faith in the government, faith in the system is at an all-time low, probably.
Yeah. Well, we've went about an hour, so I'm going to go over these quickly. Let's talk about the most logical scenarios here of what's really going on. We've ruled out coincidence. We know this is not a coincidence. I think we're all in agreement with that. So I'll go through these, and then I'm going to bounce it over to you and get your thoughts on each one of these. All right. Number one of the most common theories is that these scientists were all on the verge of announcing a discovery that would fundamentally alter human society. For example, were they going to discover microbial life on Mars? Or again, and I'm not saying that this is what I believe. I'm just throwing out some scenarios. Or the detection of, quote, intelligent life, deep signal, whatever, in deep space. In other words, there's a shadow government or some type of globalist entity, quote unquote, men in black, that intervenes to prevent public panic or to maintain control over the technology associated with this discovery. So in other words, the timing of this is being framed as a cleanup operation to ensure that whatever information is getting out remains classified and that the official narrative of whoever that is, NASA, the government, whatever, remains the only one available to the public. Thoughts?
Yeah, like I said earlier, information is currency these days. And so if you have this really high-end secret that could really revolutionize humanity for the good, for example. I remember my dad years and years ago told me about some guy in Mexico that had made a car that can run on water. The engine can run on water. And then that guy disappears, I mean, that was the first time I ever heard anything like that. And then over the years, we find out that there's always been men and women, I guess, that have come forth and had some type of revolutionary. Look at Nikola Tesla. I mean, they basically ruined him at the end, and he left him penniless. And then when he died, they came in and stole all of his secrets and stuff. So we live in the age of information. Information is currency. And if you're a company that has this cutting edge technology that you can reverse engineer and make billions off of, you're going to fight to keep that a secret, to keep that yours. You're going to fight tooth and nail so that nobody else can get that, because it's proprietary at that point. But if it were to come out, let's just go back and say in the 1950s that the government awarded Lockheed Martin with some kind of a technology from the Roswell crash. Then you've got to think, well, the government was picking sides, and they chose Lockheed to succeed over Raytheon, over Boeing, over any of these other kind of aerospace industries. And now they're going to have to look at repatriating back, tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars to these other companies to even the playing field. Nobody's going to do that. And so it's just easier to keep these secret, their own, and buried underneath their own corporate archives, hidden, rather than have to give it back over to the government and then turn around and lose tens of billions of dollars. Like, no company is going to willingly do that. So it's worth it for them to keep. I tend to think it's corporate. It's at the corporate level that these are very powerful corporations that can do this.
And one thought is that that some of the these scientists could have successfully cracked a major hurdle in exotic propulsion, such as zero-point energy and anti-gravity. You touched on that earlier. The theory would be that these breakthroughs in these non-chemical propulsion, this would render the multi-billion-dollar oil and aerospace industries obsolete overnight if we were to get our hands on this. So again, the narrative would be that these individuals were eliminated by corporate or military interest to protect the current economic status quo or to divert the technology exclusively into classified military applications. So this kind of ties in with the first scenario that I put out. Now here's another scenario. Is it possible with that there's a cover-up for possibly a planet killer asteroid? Now, this is interesting because I brought this out on the program I did with Josh Peck. There is a asteroid, and of all the names that they could come up with, they named this thing Apophis, which is the goddess of destruction. I believe that's what that means. And this thing, it missed this on the first come around. But now correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been a while since I've talked about this. But it's coming back around in, 2028, 2029, somewhere around there. And there is some thought out there that this, that this may be a cover-up, that this asteroid is in trajectory of striking the planet. Some even said that, that we could be seeing the beginnings of this with all these, these meteors. And then you had the recent one that,
Three-Eye Atlas.
Yes, Three-Eye Atlas that, that the scientists come out and try to convince us that it was alien technology and all this stuff. So there is this hypothesis around this as well, that they are, again, these individuals they know something and they could be trying to get the word out and warn us, so they're being silenced. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that if you think back to that movie you mentioned at the beginning, Deep Impact, remember that asteroid, I guess, was discovered like a year out, and they decided to keep it quiet because by the time they figured out that the trajectory, that it was going to be a direct impact to Earth, there was not enough time to really adequately, get people prepared, and they didn't want the whole civilization to break down and come unglued. A year out, they'd never get whatever they were trying to build, those underground arcs and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I could see them wanting to hide that information for the sake of civilizational stability, all around the world. But I would say even with Apophis or any of these other asteroids and things that are seemingly increasing in their numbers as well as in their proximity to the Earth, it doesn't even have to hit the Earth to cause the kind of damage.
That's right.
That could really, really mess us up. And it could hit the moon. It could hit Mars. I mean, if something large hit Mars and cause Mars to, even a chunk of Mars to come off.
Something recently did strike the moon. Did you see that?
Yeah.
It left a massive crater. They don't even know what it was. And they just NASA just sent out this recent mission, and this kind of fuels more conspiracy to this, with Artemis, which, by the way, Artemis is the name. It's in Greek mythology, is known as the daughter of Zeus, the king of the gods, little g, and was the twin sister of Apollo, the god of sun and music. And as Pete brought out earlier, if you look at all the foundation of all the space program, the people that were involved in this, Jack Parsons, heavily involved with Aleister Crowley, who was the founder of the Satanic Church. He worked with Ron Hubbard, the Babylon working. They tried to, they partook of invocations of trying to bring about, they were trying to have contact with spiritual entities. It's really creepy stuff, guys. And you start going down this rabbit trail and start digging into this. And then you've got, all these guys, Buzz Aldrin, James Webb, all these, they were either Freemasons or they were involved in the occult or Satanism. And it's not a coincidence, these names that they chose for these missions and this and that. So it's really weird, man. All this stuff, you start pulling this together, it just you get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into this. And then that leads us to the big elephant in the room. And this is the one, I guarantee if I did a poll right now with all of our people in the chat and asked them, what scenario do you think this is likely connected with? I think this would be the one. And let me just give you one little part here. Recently, a doctor, his name was Dr. Greer, he claims that for several decades, and again, this is allegedly, guys, okay, retrieved non-human biological remains that they have been retrieved and they have been used in advanced biomedical research to create, quote, part human and part non-human creatures. Now, the reason why, remember earlier, guys, when I said if you didn't see our podcast from last night, again, it was titled Angels, Giants, and Demons, The Great Deception is Coming. This is why you need to go back and watch that, because we tie that in with the days of Noah, with the Nephilim. All right, so this doctor, he explains that these experiments are part of a multi-decade psychological warfare operation run by rogue elements of the CIA and aerospace giants. Of all the terms he uses, that's interesting, giants. He suggests that these hybrids and man-made UFOs are used to, quote, stage hoaxes or and he's actually saying that along with others like General Mike Flynn, are warning, Mike Flynn came out, General Mike Flynn recently came out and warned of a potential false flag alien operation. And then, of course, you got Congressman Tim Burchett that came out and he was briefed on information that he said would, quote, set the earth on fire and keep people up at night. So in light of all this, Pete, it's like, wow.
Yeah, I was surprised that former Representative Gates came out and told that story to Representative Burchett. And I used to laugh at that. That was the one part. I could see that there was things happening in the skies that we didn't understand, or there's things happening under the oceans that we didn't understand. And Burchett is the one that I think made known that, in his dealings with a high-ranking admiral in the Navy, that they saw, I think on radar, this thing that was the size of like 3 football fields, and it was moving like 200 miles an hour under the water.
Yeah, I remember that.
And you got to think, so having been in the military for a long time, when you get to that level, you're not going to put your neck out there and say anything crazy like that. That would be a career killer for a lot of those high-ranking guys. So the fact that he was so disturbed by this, that he was able to have this conversation with the representative and say, hey, no, this is exactly what we saw, and this is exactly what it was doing. Right now, there's no human technology that can do that. There's no animals in the animal kingdom that are that large that we know of. Maybe if Godzilla is real and he lives under the ocean out there in the Pacific somewhere, maybe, but there's no animals in the animal kingdom that we know of that can do that, and that is that big. And remember a few years ago, remember off the coast of southern Africa, in between Africa and South America, there was that big anomaly out in the ocean.
Yeah, I remember. And we reported that on our website. Yep.
Yeah, it was like, what is that? And it happened a couple of times. Yep. We never got a clear answer to what that was. It was clearly, it was insane. So I have no doubt that there's things down there, but the fact that there was an active breeding program between humans and whatever these things are, a lot of people would say, well, how can, if these are fallen angels, how can they breed with humans if angels don't have the same kind of body parts or the inner workings of the reproductive systems, etc.? And one of the things that I can't remember who said this, and I caught part of it, but what they're doing it seems like they are taking some of their DNA or something of them, or something that they are able to create, these life forms. Like if you think about little gray aliens, right, or what they call aliens, they're like insects in a way, or they're things that are living, but they're not sentient and have a soul, or a kind of a
Yeah.
life-giving spirit that a human or an animal like a mammal or even a reptile does to some kind of degree. They could create these kind of meat puppets. I don't know what else to call them, but they're like meat puppets.
That's
They're
great. I'm gonna
living,
have
but
to.
they're not really alive. And the way that they're able to do that is they're taking, sperm from men that they've abducted or done things with in sleep paralysis, and they're mixing that with the eggs from women that they've abducted, and then in there they're
Wow.
injecting stuff into that embryo is, I guess, once that's fertilized, they're injecting or putting stuff in there that's not human, and then putting that back into the woman, letting her come to term, and then either she miscarriages or the baby is just taken. And then those ones that do survive, they're taking those and they're doing stuff with them. And you got to think this has been going on for a very long time. So
Since the days of
you talk
Noah.
to a lot of people.
Yeah.
You talk to a lot of people inside of that are in the know on these types of programs, and they're going to tell you that there are people walking around today that are these hybrids. They're
Guys,
not
what
fully
did I
human
say?
anymore.
I didn't mean to cut you off, man, but we literally talked about this last night. You're saying verbatim everything.
I
You
didn't
were
listen to you last night either, so
yeah,
I didn't know you were going to talk
we're
about
on
it.
the same page. You're confirming everything I said. And let me throw this out there. I said this, because there was, the Bible says in the book of Hebrews, beware of entertaining strangers, for in doing so, many have entertained angels unaware. So we know there that there's angels from God that are sent here on earth, and they take upon themselves human flesh. Now, think about this. People say, well, you would be able to distinguish if they're angels or they're spiritual beings. No, because that's why the author of Hebrews clearly says that they will look so much like a human being that you're not going to be able to distinguish it. You're going to think that you're speaking or having a relationship, communication with a flesh individual. Think about Genesis 19. 2 men were sent into the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, the cities of the plains. We know that they were angels, but they looked like they were so beautiful in their countenance that these men, these sodomites, wanted them out in the street so they could have relations with them. So having said that, I believe, and this isn't a hypothesis, okay? I believe that who's to say, if you go to the book of Peter, and in other portions of the Bible, it talks about, and Paul warned about this, and he said, Satan comes as an angel of light, and find it not strange that his apostles. So Satan has apostles in the earth working in the church to deceive people. 1 Timothy chapter 4 says they will fall away from seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. I mean, right there, they're coming into the church. Who's to say that in the last days, as we get closer, and remember Luke 17, as it were in the days of Noah and Lot, so shall it be in the return of the Son of Man. Who are we to say that there is not these beings walking around? And I talked about this, Pete, last night. I said, have you ever heard about this? The black-eyed children and these stories of, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I've heard briefly about it. I haven't really delved into it.
Yeah, and these weird, these children just show up in the stealth of night. They show up to people's homes. They show up to people in rural areas, and they come up to their car. They're wanting to come into their homes, and their eyes are completely black. They have no white of the eyes, no pupil. It's just completely black. They're like soulless. And the people that encounter these things say that they put off a creepy aura to it or a vibe to it in this, and this is demonic. So it opens up a lot of conversation on this stuff. And I always think about 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, great, lying signs and wonders that, strong delusion. And then, once I think Lee Brainerd brought out a good point. or it might have been somebody. I think it was Lee Brainerd. This all runs together on me, but we once the harpazo takes place, the rapture takes place, there will be such a level of deception and lawlessness that it will be the breeding ground for the Antichrist to emerge. And with that will come, the false prophet and these lying signs and wonders. And the Bible says if it were possible, it would be so great, so intense that even the elect would be deceived. So it just makes you think about that.
Yeah, in that passage in 2 Thessalonians, it says the coming of the lawless one. So in his approaching, so he's not even fully manifested yet, but even in his approaching, it would be almost preceded by lying signs and wonders. And I've heard people say or make the analogy that it's like the veil is thinning between the physical corporal realm and the spiritual ethereal realm that's divided the world ever since the flood. Before the flood, it seems like angels interacted in both holy and unholy angels interacted with mankind to a much greater degree than at any time afterwards. But knowing that their time is so short and knowing what fate awaits them in the lake of fire, I would venture to guess that Satan is going to throw everything in the kitchen sink at mankind, at the world, in order to prevent God's plan from moving forward. So he has a couple of different avenues that he's doing this through. Well, he's got many avenues, but he's got 2 or 3 major agendas he's got to get done. One is to cripple and silence and hamstring the church in its waning days prior to the rapture of the church, which he's been very effective in doing. Lauren, our friend from Certainty from Uncertain Times, remember she's got that shirt called the 6 Percenters that there's really, and that's based off of some either Gallup or Pew or one of the major polling that said that there's only about 6% of the Christian evangelical population that even believes in the rapture, believes in the last days, believes in a literal interpretation of scripture, creation, etc.
Yep.
And then the other major agenda would be to destroy Israel or get Israel, get the Jews out of the land by whatever means possible. And we've seen that just unbelievable anti-Semitism being ramped up around the world like crazy for no apparent reason. And it's even gone so far as to spread within the ranks of evangelicals. And that is largely, that's come in by ways of faulty hermeneutics, faulty eschatologies like amillennialism, or just a liberal theology that does not take the Bible literally anymore. And then a final agenda would be to so desensitize the world to the supernatural and the occult that when the rapture does happen, that these aliens or these spaceships or whatever are going to show up. And they're going to immediately, the powers that be are going to be able to point to those ships that are just hovering there in the sky over the White House and over major cities and say, see, that was them. That wasn't a rapture. And I happen to think that if Satan is investing this much time and energy in trying to discredit the rapture, that the rapture has to be probably one of, if not the most powerful evangelical tools that the world's ever seen. And when you go to Revelation 7, you see that John is shown these martyrs that are surrounding the throne and under the throne with their palm branches and crying out, how much longer until you avenge us? There are so many that there's no number given. He said the number couldn't be, it was like a countless number that were there. So if you think about that in light of the fact in Revelation, I think it's in 8 or 9, it talks about this demonic army, and John is told that there's 200 million in this army, horsemen or whatever, demonic horsemen. He goes, and I heard that number. He heard the number for this demonic horsemen that are 200 million, but he is not given the number for the martyrs surrounding the throne because there's so many. So it has to be a number greater than 200 million. So I happen to think that the rapture is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful evangelical tool that the world will have ever seen, because brother, you and I will be out that day. We may be at work. We may be out with family or out at a restaurant or, doing a live stream, whatever we're doing. and then the rapture is going to happen, and people are going to see that with their own eyes. And regardless of what happens, in the sky, that's why it's so important for us to get the message of the rapture out. So even if they don't believe us right now, the fact that we're telling them ahead of time that this is coming and it's going to happen, that they will believe. And that falls in the principle of John 14:29, where Jesus is saying, to his disciples, I tell you these things beforehand so that when it happens, when it comes to pass, you will believe. So we're telling people now beforehand that the rapture is coming. And when it does, millions of Christians around the world are suddenly going to be taken. Children under the age of accountability are going to be taken. And it's going to impact the world, and they're going to be caught just baffled. And if hopefully, if there's unbelievers, they're actually there with a believer that is raptured. That way they can see it for their own eyes. And they're not going to be persuaded by what the media tells them or what the government narrative becomes or whatever influencer comes out and says, no, that was aliens. No, it's not aliens. It is the rapture of the church.
Amen. Well, brother, if you got a few minutes to stick around, we can shift gears and do a little bit of a Q&A for a few minutes. Are you good with that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So guys, if you have any questions for us, for Brother Pete or for me or for both of us or whatever the case may be, now's your time. Admins, I see you guys in there. Try, if you want to help us out, if you know of any questions that anybody has asked previously, even during this broadcast, now's the time to ask those questions. And this is kind of a cool little way to end the broadcast. And it doesn't have to be in relation to necessarily to the subject at hand. But this is a bonus. Freddie said this is a bonus. Yes, that's good. So Carol, just like Carol did in the chat, guys, she said use question before your question. So just put in all capitals if you can, put question, and then that way I can see it. And that way we can point that out. So let's see. This is a good one. So Pete, Caleb wants to know, how were you saved? How did you come to the Lord?
I got saved. I think I was 6 years old. My mom's in the chat somewhere. She'll remember we were in a church in Madisonville, Texas. And we had some friends that lived there, the McCullums, and they had ministries that went into Mexico all the time. So you think about like the whitest family you can think of, like the Waltons, and they all speak like fluent Spanish. And they have this amazing ministries in Mexico. But we were friends with them for years and years. And we went to some church down there in Madisonville. I just remember that there were missionaries there that day. They'd come from Africa. They were telling us about the missions in Africa. And at the end of it, they did an altar call, and I went forward. I think I even lied to my parents. I said I wanted to go pray for the animals, and I went up there and I ended up getting saved. So that was my awesome. First. I think I mean that's when I count myself as being saved at that point. Now, obviously, I was 6. There's a lot I didn't understand about anything, but I had my come to Jesus moment where I feel like that was where my I don't say rebirth, but it was my awakening, as it were. I was 33. I was in a church in Clarksville, Tennessee. So that was the time God really got a hold of me and really opened my eyes to the lateness of the hour.
Praise God. Okay, here's Paige. What is the next prophetic event on the calendar? What's next? What do you think the next major prophetic event to look for?
Well, I mean, we're seeing multiple things happening right now that are going to be shaping the world immediately after the rapture. So stuff's already lining up for the Gog and Magog coalition. We see right now just the amount of attacks and stuff that Israel and the United States has done against Israel or against Iran. And you've got the players behind that kind of jockeying in position via Russia, obviously Persia, the Islamic allies in Africa, and probably across the stands. So we're seeing the pre-positioning now, but I think as far as the church goes, obviously it would be the rapture. And, we don't know the day or the hour, but, I believe that we should be able to kind of recognize the season.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're seeing things line up for events that happen after the rapture tells us that the rapture's all the sooner. So I think the rapture is the next major prophetic event for the church. But while we're waiting for the rapture, we're also seeing all these other things being set up for things that happen inside of the 70th week. The one world system, the global system, that the digital currency system that's coming. Most industrial nations right now are just drowning in debt. We're at like 40 trillion in debt. Japan's in debt. Western Europe's in debt. I mean, most nations are in some staggering level of debt right now. So the system that we're under is unsustainable, and they're gearing up very rapidly to get some type of a digital currency online. We see the fact that AI is going to be probably part of the reason that economies collapse, because when you start taking away these good jobs, these white collar jobs and those white collar jobs are being replaced by artificial intelligence. Well, when banks, if I came in there with a white collar job and I'm making 150, 200,000 a year, and I come in and apply for a home loan or mortgage loan or whatever, the bank looks at me as like, man, I'm a solid investment because I got a very good job. I'm able to pay my bills on time, et cetera, et cetera. But when all of those white collar jobs are replaced by AI and now those guys are out of business, then that's going to impact the mortgage industry. That's going to impact the housing industry. It's going to be a domino effect. So we're seeing the world being set up like we're watching this house of cards being beautifully built, right? It's amazing. It's all inspiring, but it's still a house of cards. And all it's going to take is just a little wind to knock it all over. So I think AI, there's so many different things happening right now that are going to set the world up they're going to be crying out for somebody to take over, somebody to fix this huge mess that the rapture caused or the aliens or whatever they're going to blame it on.
Yeah.
So,
by the way, everybody's giving a shout out to your mom in the chat. So hello, Pete's
good.
mom. By the way, I want to welcome you. And you're very blessed, man. My mom went on to be with the Lord in 2005. I got saved in 2000. My mom was backslid, and the Lord used me to lead her back to the Lord. Man, I could do a whole hour podcast on that. It was an amazing how the Lord, the things that the Lord did. And many of you guys have heard me talk about this, but she never lived to see either one of her grandchildren. So I have an 18-year-old and a 10-year-old, and she went on to be with the Lord before, on this side of heaven before she ever got to see him. So that'll be a wonderful time in heaven, when she finally comes face to face with her grandkids. So that's a blessing as always. Let's see. Hannah asked a question that I think I can answer this. If Adam and Eve were created perfect, how could they be deceived? Because God gave us a free will. We're not puppets. They had a free will. And that I think that's a really quick, short answer to that. Let's see here. Scroll down here. Do you think that Trump's moves line up with the forming of the 10 kingdoms?
Say that again. Do I see the what?
Do you think that Trump's moves, his actions that he's taking right now, do you think this is setting up the stage for the formation of the 10 kings, the 10 kingdoms, Revelation 17?
Yeah, I do. I think this whole board of peace. So just quickly, there was only two countries that he ever needed to invade in this, or not invade, but, regime change, whatever you want to call it. And that was Venezuela and Iran. So Venezuela would handle the Western Hemisphere. That would set the domino. That was the first domino to get everything in line for the Western Hemisphere, which, interestingly enough, if you look back at the 1930s technique map, it has basically everything, all the countries from Venezuela through Central America, Cuba, et cetera, all of the islands in the Caribbean, all the way up through Canada and Greenland as being part of one system, right? One regional system. I think if Trump does that, then there's going to be a desire for South America, the rest of South America, to form a region. And then you see what the other country was obviously Iran. In taking out Iran, he could establish the Abraham Accords, and then the Middle East would kind of fix itself, because now the main threat that is destabilizing the Middle East is now gone. So those two countries, I think, set in motion a lot of different things that are happening. And even though he went after Iran and Venezuela, the larger fish that they're going to try and knock down is China. And it's interesting that we don't hear a whole lot out of China until the end of the tribulation, and that's when the kings of the east begin to march towards Israel, and then they are kind of co-opted into the Battle of Armageddon. So it's interesting that China is sidelined the way they are. The other nations that come in at Gog and Magog, which I believe happens after the rapture, but before the 70th week officially begins. In both taking out the church, you create a vacuum. And then when you take out the Gog and Magog, when God takes out the Gog and Magog coalition, that also creates a vacuum. And that allows for Europe to rise and become the dominant region to dominate over the rest of the world. And I believe the Antichrist comes out of the old Roman Empire, as Scripture says, and he may be their version of like a Donald Trump, like but instead of being 80 and kind of brash and all this guy is going to be young, energetic. He's going to be multilingual. He's going to be incredibly smart. IQ in the 400s. I know that's unfeasible right now, but this guy is going to have all the power of hell backing him.
Yeah.
And you got to think too that angels and demons, or angels and fallen angels, they know where all the bodies are buried. They know where all the skeletons are. They know where all the treasure is buried. There is no secret on the earth that's hidden from them, because they've been around this whole time. And when they choose to give all of their power and this glory and wealth over to one individual, he's going to be unstoppable at that point. So
makes sense. Yeah. Let's see. Somebody had a good question on here. What do you think? At what age do you think the age of innocence has passed, or the age of accountability? Because I think, if I'm correct, they're referring to, for example, when David lost his son because of his adulterous affair with Bathsheba, he lost his child, and he fasted, but the child passed, and he said, I cannot bring him to me, but I can go be where he is. So that to me is one of the most powerful scriptures that implies that children, under the age of accountability, if they pass, they die, their soul and spirit goes into paradise. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, in the presence of the Lord. Hell, there is no children in hell under the age of accountability. Now, question, and I'll throw this over to you, P, if you want to elaborate on this, but I think the answer I don't think there's a set answer, because I think it's based on the development of the individual, because I know children that, that are 13, that are, that are more mature than 19-year-olds. I'm just saying, when I met my wife, we were very young. When I met my wife, she was one of the most mature girls at that time, because we were pretty young. I mean, it'll be, this year will be 26 years we've been married. So we've been together for a while. And when we met, we were kids, basically. I mean, we were she was in her late teens and I was in my early 20s, but she was one of the most mature young women that I knew, that was living on her own, had her own vehicle, paying her own bills. And most of the girls that I knew at that time were definitely not that mature. So anyway, I think it's different for every individual. What's your thoughts on that, Pete?
I tend to think it's older than we think, because we're not given a particular age in Scripture, but there are a couple of instances where we see age does come into play. For example, in Exodus 30, and I'll just read this here. This is in Exodus 30, verse 11. When the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, when you take the census of the children of Israel for their number, then every man shall give a ransom for himself to the Lord. When you number them, there may be no plague among them when you number them. And then skipping down to 14, Everyone included among those who are numbered from 20 years old and above shall give an offering to the Lord. Now, this was a ransom for your soul, right? This is that phrase that Moses uses here. So if you're over the age of 20, you have to give a ransom for your soul. If you're under the age, you do not. You're not even numbered in the census. If that were a standalone passage, I would say, okay, well, that's kind of flimsy. But then you go to Numbers 32:11, when Joshua and Caleb and the other 10 spies go into Canaan and they come back. And obviously the 10 spies gave the negative report. And now the whole nation of Israel is all worried and anxious, and they're frustrated and complaining that they don't want to go fight these giants. But then Joshua and Caleb said, no, we can defeat them because our God is greater than they are. Now, who was able to go into the promised land?
Yeah.
Those that were under the age of 20.
Right.
It says nothing about what the children believed. It says nothing about their own, whether they were good
That's
or bad or
interesting.
whatever.
Yeah.
It just made that arbitrary cutoff age is under the age of 20. So you have two instances where that age is given to us, where God delineates between accountable and not accountable. Now, fast forward. Now, well, let me back up. At that time, the age of humans was stabilized. Like if you go back before the flood, obviously people were living for hundreds of years. But by the time Moses writes this, the average lifespan was somewhere between 70 and 80 years.
Yeah.
And so when you think about human biology, the human brain develops differently. So basically, you're going to develop from the rear to the front, to the prefrontal cortex. So the rear of your head, the rear of your brain covers your motor skills, right?
Yeah.
So children, when you have babies, you give them tummy time. They kind of learn, they're on their tummy, and then they finally figure out how to roll over, and then they figure out how to crawl. And then before they know it, they're kind of up walking, or they're holding on to things, but they're able to stand. And next thing you know, they're able to take a few steps. That's all. Your brain is developing from the rear to the front. The last part of your brain that fully develops is your prefrontal cortex, and that's based off of your education, your experience, the circumstances you find yourself in. That's going to shape how you see the world. Well, what is our salvation based off of? It's based off of believing, first of all, in the finished work of Jesus Christ on the cross. But that belief is centered on your prefrontal cortex, how you understand Jesus. So that's the way God created us. God could have created us to be fully cognizant on day one. We could come out of the womb and we were already talking, and we already having conversation. What's up, Mom? I'm glad I'm out. I'm hungry. Let's go do something. We could have came out fully conscious and fully developed, but that's not how God developed us. He developed us in a particular way to arrive at maturity around the same general time frame. Now, we in the United States as humans, we set the law between adulthood and childhood at the age of 18. We know throughout history that that's fluctuated based off the cultures. We know children in earlier times got married at like 13, 14, whatever. A lot of that was done out of necessity for where they lived and stuff. And one of the arguments I hear a lot, there's two, but one is that people say, well, the bar mitzvah is at the age of 13, or the bat mitzvah for girls. But bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah, that's not in the Bible. That was developed in the Middle Ages, so that's not something that comes out of scripture. That's tradition. And then secondly, we want to say that, salvation then is based off of knowing right from wrong. Well, I would argue that even at 16 years old, you might know, or you probably know right from wrong, but you have very little understanding of consequences.
Yes.
And I can think back to when I was a 16-year-old, and my mom in the chat would definitely attest to this. I was a knucklehead, and that's putting it mildly. I thought I knew everything, and I didn't know any. Looking back at myself, I was an idiot. I didn't know anything. So
wow, that's powerful, man. That brings a lot of peace and comfort to a lot of people. What you're saying right there.
Yeah, and I just again, the scriptures don't give us a specific age, and I think you're right that God does default to save children when they turn to Him. So at the age of 6, I think God saved me at that point when somebody walked me through the salvation process, believing on Jesus. And I think God always defaults to save children. And now the point is that if this is in keeping with God's character in Peter, First Peter, we know that God is, or Second Peter, God is long suffering that none should perish. He doesn't delight in the death of the wicked, and he definitely doesn't delight in the death of children, for sure, of any age. So I'm like you. I think that people can mature at different ages and at different speeds and pace depending on their circumstances. I would say that growing up in the barrio and the ghetto that we lived in for 80 to 84, that definitely matured me. And by the time we moved to San Marcos, which was at the time a real sleepy little college town, I came into fifth grade like looking around at these people, and I'm looking at like the big tough guys. I'm like, and those guys are nothing. Like I'm coming from the barrio where like there was gang fights in the street. Growing up in the early '80s, dudes with knives and sticks and chains and drugs and all sorts of stuff going on. And that's the world I was exposed to early in my elementary years. So your environment definitely matures you. And sometimes, kids are easily swayed too. They can be persuaded to do evil things at very young ages.
Yep.
And again, I just think it goes back to the character of God, that he's long suffering, that none should perish. So he's going to give children the most time that they can to come to that knowledge of salvation. And one last thing on this, you'll hear people all the time say, well, what about the children that drowned in the flood or the children that died in Sodom and Gomorrah? Well, you're talking about physical death versus eternal death. Right. So I think that we see in life that children die all the time for all number of reasons. And that has nothing to do with their eternal destiny. And I got to think back to the character of God. Is he going to allow a child that's 12 years old, that let's say the child grew up in a Hindu family, didn't know any better and had no way to even escape that lifestyle, that culture, and that child dies? Does that child go to hell for being born in the wrong skin in the wrong country? I don't think so. And I think that God understands our circumstances better than we understand our circumstances. So again, we'll leave that to God. The point is, if you have children, share the gospel with them young and keep reinforcing it to them. And when the Holy Spirit draws them and the time is right, that they will come to salvation earlier is preferable than later.
I agree. I mean, that's good, man. That's some good stuff. Somebody said here, this is a question. What did Jesus mean when he said there are some that are standing here that will not see death until you see the coming of the Lord? I think I can answer this. There was one apostle who did see the coming of the Lord. His name was John. He wrote the book of Revelation, and he saw the coming of the Lord. He saw it in a vision. And this is, he's the one who wrote the book of Revelation. So that's what Jesus meant when he said, because and actually when Jesus made that statement, the disciples began to question one another, and this is why you remember when Peter came back and he says, do you love me? Feed my sheep, feed my sheep. And he did this like 3 times. And then Peter looked at John and he said, what about him? And Jesus said, don't worry about him. You follow me, and don't worry about him. So it was circulated among and I did some research on this, and among the apostles that that one of them was never going to see physical death. So this is what this means right here. So John saw the coming of the Lord. And by the way, they tried to kill him, they tried to boil him in oil, they did all kinds of stuff, but he stayed alive enough to be able to see the coming of the Lord. And again, you can find that in and I believe Revelation chapter 4, John saw the rapture. I believe that's where the rapture takes place. Revelation chapter 4. He hears a voice say, come up here. That voice is speaking like a trumpet. He's immediately caught up in the Spirit. And the Lord says, I will show you things that will happen immediately after this. And it was after the rapture, you go into all the seals and the bowls and the trumpet judgments and all that. You got anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, well, John also wrote Revelation 19.
Yep.
That's the actual second coming. So he was shown that as well. So John was the one that saw that. And he recorded that in 95 AD. on the island of Patmos. The church age had already begun. It had already been in place for 60 something years at that point. And Jesus' word was true that there's some standing here. And I think you could count Paul, that was obviously was caught up to the third heaven. He wasn't able to write down what he saw, but obviously Peter and others of the apostles, I believe, probably had visions. Some of that recorded for us, and others maybe not. But they also saw the transfiguration. So, anyways, I definitely think that John for sure is the number one guy that did see the second coming and saw the kingdom coming in its glory and power.
Yep. We got about 6 minutes. Here's a good one right here. Will people in that are repopulating the earth during the millennial reign, will they need vehicles, have jobs, and will I be still hard to look at? Laugh out loud. So that's a 3-part question. I don't think that you're going to need vehicles, because if we are likened unto, the scripture says, it is not known what we shall be, but we know that when he appears, we shall be likened unto him. If you look at the resurrected body of Jesus Christ, he was able to walk through walls. He was able to transport himself from one location to another, but he was able to eat. He had physical markings on his body. He was able to communicate with them. So we will have a body like Jesus Christ. But if you look at angels, they're able to move at the speed of light, which, again, we're talking about lightning. They can move at the speed of lightning 7.5 times around the earth in 1 second. It's like, in a moment. In Corinthians talks about a moment, twinkling an eye. So I believe that we won't need vehicles. I believe we'll be able to move and transport around, just like the resurrected body of Jesus, how he talked about doing that. Jobs, I think the scriptures talk about there will be positions given, because there's going to be rewards, there'll be crowns, there'll be positions, there'll be kings, there'll be priests. All these things will happen in the millennial reign of Christ. Now, Pete, I'm sure you probably want to elaborate a little bit more on that, but that's kind of a synopsis of my answer there.
Yeah, I was going to go to 1 John 3 as well, that we will be able to travel at the speed of thought.
Yep.
We'll be in our immortal, glorified bodies. And I kind of think that that's the bodies that we would have looked like had sin never entered into the world, except even at that point, it was even immortalized in the sense that we'll be flesh and bone. We won't have internal organs in the sense that we do now, because we won't require blood. And notice that Jesus said after his resurrection, he goes to his disciples, touch me, for I'm flesh and bone. I'm not a ghost. I'm flesh and bone. He doesn't say I'm flesh and blood. And then if you go back to Adam and Eve, they were flesh and bone. Flesh of my flesh, bone, or all that was said there. But if you don't need blood, or if you don't have internal organs, you don't need blood. And I think that in these glorified bodies, we will be able to do things that we could only dream of today. I spoke this weekend in Gardendale, Texas, and out there in West Texas. And one of the examples I gave is like the host there, the pastor. It's like Terry and I, we could go sit, we'll just be in the millennial kingdom one day and said, hey, let's just go hang out and sit on the rings of Saturn if we want, and we could just imagine, we could travel there at the speed of thought, and then we're sitting on the rings of Saturn watching the universe out in front of us. So we're going to be able to manipulate physical matter, but we will not be constrained by physical matter. And I think that's an amazing thought in and of itself. If that were all that it was going to be, that would still be amazing. But we'll be able to eat in these bodies. We'll be able to enjoy and rest and drink and laugh and love and hug and listen and learn and build and explore. I think that God is not just creating, that the earth is not going to be the be all end all. I think that there's going to be worlds beyond our, within our universe that we'll be able to explore throughout all eternity, as well as other dimensions. I think there's going to be countless dimensions that we can travel in and amongst, and we're not going to be constrained by anything. I think we're constrained right now by the limits of our imagination. That's probably about the extent of, we can't really think beyond what we've seen on, say, a movie or something, but in some kind of way, I think there's going to be a multiverse in the end that will be able to travel through dimensions and travel through realities that we couldn't even fathom right now. So yeah, it's
I'll
gonna be
leave you.
cool.
I'll leave you guys with this. Jesus said, or not. The apostle said, "Eyes have not seen, ears have not heard, nor has it entered into the thoughts of man what God has in store for those who love Him. But He has revealed it unto us by His Spirit." Exciting times. Well, Pete, it's been a pleasure. We're coming up on 2 hours, so I guess we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Man, what an amazing discussion. We've covered a lot of ground on the disclosure stuff, the missing scientists, and who knows, by the end of the week, we may have more, which, it's going to be interesting next week to see what comes of this, if Trump is going to actually, if we're going to get new information on this. And then what's even more interesting, I think by the time we get into the summer, we may see what this was all about. I have a hunch that we're going to probably find out a lot more by the time we get into around July or August. But I guess time will tell. But remember, guys, if you're not following Pete Garcia, you can find him on his YouTube channel, Rev310, at Pete Garcia 542, or rev310.substack.com. That's where you can catch his programs. And again, he speaks at a lot of conferences. He does a lot of stream conferences. And then you guys didn't catch this earlier. Let me see if I can pull this up. Again, we are, him and I will both be in Boise, Idaho on May 29th. Let me see if I can pull this up. We'll pull this up let's see if we can get this up here so we can see this. Here we go. And we're talking about the May 29th, 30th conference. Again, this is at 412 Church, Idaho, Boise, Idaho. I myself, along with Pete Garcia, will be there, but it will also be Pastor Tom Hughes, Pastor Brandon Holthouse, and Pastor Billy Crone. So this is going to be a 2-day session there. I think everyone will be speaking, and then there'll be a live Q&A at the end of that conference. And if you live anywhere in this vicinity and you'd like to be a part of this, you can go and you can register right here. Again, this is at hopeforourtimes.com under the upcoming events. Again, just look for the May 29th, 30th conference, and here is the address. Again, that's how you can register for this. So, Pete, if you have any closing thoughts, anything you'd like to say, maybe there might be somebody watching or listening, they slip into the broadcast. Maybe they're away from the Lord or they don't know the Lord. Closing thoughts before we close out this podcast.
Yeah, as long as you have breath in your lungs and you have the ability to think, there's no distance that you can go from God. And I know for sure that I drifted hard for about 15 years before God got a hold of me. So even if you have loved ones or friends that seems like they've drifted away from the truth and have gone into other things, that they're never too far from God, keep praying for them, keep loving on them, and being salt and light to them, because they can always be, the Holy Spirit is the one that softens the hearts. And we may not see the immediate effects of our prayers and our efforts in the here and now, but those prayers are not going to go unanswered. They're not going to go ignored. They're going to be dealt with by God and the Holy Spirit. And hopefully it's in their softening and not hardening of their heart to come to Him. And I'll just say this too. I think I had set up a live tonight because I think you and I were trying to do the whole dual streaming thing, but we couldn't make that happen. But apparently my live is still over there. It's just kind of a chat that's, I don't know, it's unmonitored right now or something. But I may jump on there just after this, just because there's been some folks waiting. But I'll be on Wednesday night with the roundtable, Technocracy Roundtable. I think that's at 6 p.m. I always get mixed up on the Central Eastern time with all that kind of stuff. So I'll be there then. And then May 1st, May 2nd, I will be in Flowood, Mississippi. So if you're anywhere around Mississippi, Flowood, Mississippi, that'll be a great event. Again, Tom Hughes will be there, Alex Newman, myself, and the Gauchers are putting it on. So that's going to be a great event. So thank you, Ricky, for having me. It's been a pleasure. And anytime you want to do this, man, let me know.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's an honor to always have you on, and appreciate you, all your insight and your wisdom that you give us. So appreciate it.
All right.
All right, guys. So again, thank you so much for being a part of the program. Again, if you guys have not downloaded our free app, I know there might be a lot of you guys into this chat right now or in the stream, and you are not aware that we do have we want to give you a free gift. We want to give you our app. You can pick it up today on Apple, Android. If you're watching this right on your screen, you can scan that QR code, and it's absolutely free. It's going to get all the information right there, podcast, breaking news, headlines, everything. Hit yes to push notifications, and you'll be squared away. And as always, if this ministry's blessed you, it's informed you, it's equipped you, whatever your relationship is with this ministry, again, all of our podcasts are free. We just ask that, whatever the Lord puts on your heart, you be obedient to that, and God will bless you for that. If you'd like to know more about supporting or partnering with our ministry, here's a quick video on that, and we'll be right back with our closing thoughts. Okay, well, the video's not going to cue. So here's what you can do, guys. You can go to endtimeheadlines.com, endtimeheadlines.org. You can give by Super Chat. You can give through the app. There's many places you can do that. We have, again, through Venmo, PayPal, there's many locations that you could do that. And again, we always appreciate, if you wish to give by check or money order, you could do that at End Time Headlines, P.O. Box 1391, Monroe, Georgia 30655. So look, we love you guys. We appreciate you. And as always, until we see you guys on the next one, I pray that the Lord bless you, may he keep you, and may his countenance shine upon you. We'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to the End Time Headlines podcast. We pray that you've been blessed and equipped by today's message. For more information about how you can help partner with our ministry, please visit endtimeheadlines.org.